DOJ investigators looking into the stolen documents at Mar-a-Lago have a second person that they think they might be able to use to tighten the case against Donald Trump. This is this individual you're probably more likely to have heard of than the first, the cook. Kash Patel, longtime aide and ally to Mr. Trump. They want to bring him in to answer questions before a grand jury about how the documents were taken to Mar-a-Lago and how Mr. Trump, his aides, and his lawyers dealt with requests from the government to return them throughout 2021 and the beginning of 2022. So bear in mind that shortly after the initial raid, Mr. Patel publicly proclaimed that the former president had declassified the records before leaving office. So they would like him to come in and testify to that. You've said that it's the case. Now, why don't you say that under oath? And I think that that's a reasonable request. I think it is really interesting that he is out there saying that they were declassified, whereas most defenders of Donald Trump have limited themselves to saying documents can be declassified, maybe mentally. He actually said that it had happened. You'll note that there's a difference between that and the stance of his lawyers, who refused to say literally anything about declassification. Again, they will not say whether he did or did not declassify them because, and this is, I'm gonna be delving into the dangerous territory of speculation, because he didn't declassify them, they're lying. So anyway, in theory, Kash Patel is not gonna wanna go on the record as saying they're declassified when there's literally no paper trail to that effect. So bringing him in might result in some testimony that makes Trump and his lawyers look a little bit uncomfortable or awkward. I don't know exactly what you get coming out of this, but I think part of that, as you had said earlier, Farron, trying to make it as airtight a case as possible, is they just want to get Trump or his legal team on the record lying as part of their defense. There's been this gap between the forward-facing public defense and what they've actually been willing to attest to before Raymond Dearie, the special master, so far. And I think they just want to merge those two worlds. And it's gonna be really interesting to see. At some point, Trump's legal team is going to have to go on the actual record. Do you think that Kash Patel could be an important part of that?
He might be, but the weird issue with him is if he walks in, in a deposition or as part of an investigation under oath, whatever it is, and he says, yes, I personally saw Donald Trump declassify these documents. He said it, he stood over them, he declared it, did whatever it is he had to do, and he did it. And they're gonna say, okay, where's the evidence? Well, the evidence is me telling you this. And that is gonna put the DOJ to say, okay, well, we think you're lying. Patel will say, but I'm not. And that's what you have. Like that is literally what is going to play itself out in court, if that again is where this goes. So the DOJ is not necessarily going to be able to prove that he is lying because there's no paper evidence here, unless of course there is a caveat to that. I'll get to that in a moment. Or secondly, Patel is not going to be able to prove that this actually happened because there's no physical evidence other than what he claims to have happened. Now, where they could get him is if he goes on the record and says, okay, it happened here, it happened at this time, and it happened in this way. And then if they talk to somebody else who was there, maybe it's Trump, maybe it's somebody else, and they say, oh yeah, it happened at a different place, at a different time, in a different way, then you can easily prove, okay, well, your stories don't match up. One of you is lying, probably both of you are lying. Maybe you should have talked about it beforehand, even though that's illegal. But what I'm saying is Patel has had a lot of time with Donald Trump recently. If Patel is the only person who says, I saw Trump do this, there's a possibility the two of them could have sat down at any point in the last few months and said, okay, when did it happen? Where did it happen? What was I wearing? What was the weather like? Let's get all the little minute details worked out.
Sure.
So that way, when they come asking, we can both tell the same story. Again, pure speculation, right? We don't know that happened, but I'm saying there's opportunities for that to have happened. But beyond that, short of Patel producing evidence that this happened, the DOJ is not going to be able to necessarily prove that he's lying. but that's irrelevant compared to the fact that Patel can't prove that it happened. So the jury's not gonna buy what Patel is selling them. And I think that's probably the biggest point.
I get all of what you're saying, but just to be clear, like there would have to be paperwork for this declassification because it is not actually a psionic enterprise to declassify documents. So like them saying it happened, if there isn't the documents, it is irrelevant that they just say it, right?
It is, because that is, of course, one way to declassify documents. He can come out and say, okay, this is declassified, go do the thing. Like you have to have that second part. It has to be filed with whatever agency it's from, DHS, DOJ, CIA, whoever it is. They then have to go through, mark it up, redact what needs to be redacted. There's a process. It's not just saying, hey, it's free, here you go, here's documents. That's not how it works. So yeah, you're gonna have to have the follow-up, but he can, of course, direct people to say, I am officially declassifying these things. Then comes the second part, and we never had the second part on any of this. So that's where we kind of get into, I guess, the constitutional crisis of, but he said it, but he didn't, but they didn't do it. So is it or isn't it? And with the way the Supreme Court is, that's terrifying because they could easily, interject at some point if it comes to it and say, oh, no. All the president has to do is say, yeah, it's done, and then it's done. And that's going to be terrible for this country moving forward, regardless of who is president at that point. But we could see that from them.
Yeah, and let's, it's been a bit since I've seen a write-up about this, but early on there had been references to certain documents that cannot even be declassified during that process that you had talked about, that he does not actually have control over literally every document that the federal government controls. But this is sort of a demonstration of the difference that people point out between people like a candidate like Trump and a candidate like DeSantis. First of all, DeSantis probably never would have wanted the documents, but if he wanted the documents, he would have just done the paperwork. Why didn't he just do the paperwork? Like Trump just continually undercuts himself with his laziness and lack of attention to detail. He could have mostly declassified these and been fine. This is such an own goal. None of this scandal, we could have set this aside, never known about it, and focused on the billion other lawsuits that he's currently facing. But unfortunately, he's so wildly incompetent that he turned this into a big thing. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.